Right.
when he came out and said that Alex had talked to him, last year or something like that.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, because I actually had been talking with on a conference call with Irving Azoff, Alex, and Dave last year.
Van Halen was a band that rocked the world with their powerful music, wild shows, and amazing talent. But behind the scenes, things were often messy. There were fights, personal struggles, and changes that kept fans and bandmates on edge. One of the most dramatic times in the band's history happened during the making of their 11th studio album, Van Halen III. This album was released in 1998, but the events surrounding it started in the years before. At the center of the story is Michael Anthony, the band's longtime bass player. For years, Michael had been part of Van Halen's classic sound. He had seen the band rise to the top, and he had also seen many ups and downs. In a rare and honest moment, Michael Anthony opened up about what really happened during the creation of Van Halen III, and how personal problems, especially Alex Van Halen's divorce, turned the album's recording process into complete chaos. By 1996, Van Halen was at a major crossroads. Their lead singer at the time, Sammy Hagar, had left the band after years of success. After that, there was a short and awkward reunion with the original frontman, David Lee Roth, but that didn't last either. The band needed a new lead singer, and they chose Gary Cherone, who had been the frontman of the band Extreme. Fans weren't sure what to expect from Gary Cherone, and to be honest, many didn't really connect with this new version of Van Halen. This third era of the band was short-lived. Only one album was made with Gary before talks of bringing David Lee Roth back began again. That one album was Van Halen III, and even today fans are divided about it. Some think it was brave and experimental, while others believe it was a confusing mess. Van Halen, KOS. Michael Anthony described this period as bittersweet. The band was trying to reinvent itself, but everything felt off. Behind the scenes, band members were dealing with serious personal problems, and it affected their ability to work together. One of the biggest issues was that Alex Van Halen, the band's drummer and brother of guitarist Eddie Van Halen, was going through a very painful divorce. During an interview, Michael Anthony said, "I don't even like talking about the recording process of that album. It took us in every direction you could imagine." He explained that things were so disorganized that Eddie Van Halen, who was usually the guitarist, ended up playing the drums on some tracks. He also played bass on a few songs, even though that was Michael's role in the band. It was like everyone was doing whatever they wanted because they didn't have a clear direction. The group was supposed to be recording as a team, but Michael said that only a couple of songs on the album were actually recorded with the full band playing together in the studio. "That was kind of sad," Michael said. "It could have been a lot better." Despite all the behind-the-scenes issues, Michael Anthony still remembered some good things about that time. When the band went on tour to support Van Halen III, it gave them a bit of a fresh start. Gary Cherone was eager to please the fans. He wanted to perform everything, old songs, new songs, and even some rare tracks that hadn't been played in years. Songs like Somebody Get Me a Doctor and Mean Street were added to the set list again. Michael said, "I had a lot of fun on that tour because we got to play songs we hadn't touched in years. That part was great." One fan who listened to Van Halen III every day while driving to and from work shared how, after 2 months, he actually started to enjoy the album. "At first, it didn't wow me," the fan said, "but once I really listened, I started to appreciate all the layers. Songs like Fire in the Hole and Without You started to grow on me. And Year to the Day? One of the greatest songs ever, in my opinion." That kind of deep listening helped some fans enjoy the album, even if it didn't get the love that earlier records had received. It's clear the album had some gems, but the problems behind the scenes made it hard for the music to shine. Michael Anthony left the band a few years later in 2006. He was replaced by Wolfgang Van Halen, Eddie's son, which was another controversial decision. But Michael stayed respectful. He focused on new music and projects like Chickenfoot, a supergroup he formed with Sammy Hagar and others. Years later, in 2010, Gary Cherone was asked if he still talked to any of the guys from Van Halen. "I keep in touch with Michael," he said. "I saw him a couple of months ago in Boston with Chickenfoot. They were great. I hung out with Sammy, and the band blew me away live." But no, I'm not in touch with Alex or Eddie. It just kind of faded away. So what went wrong with Van Halen III? Even the album's producer Mike Post admitted that things didn't go as planned. He said the album just wasn't very good, even though the people involved had great talent. Mike explained that he was brought in by Eddie Van Halen himself. They were friends, and Eddie respected Mike's musical mind and technical skills. Mike Post said, "I think Eddie hired me because I wasn't a drug addict. I've never had a problem with substances, and I think he appreciated that. We were really kind to each other." There were rumors that Van Halen III was originally supposed to be a solo album by Eddie, but Mike cleared that up. No, it wasn't meant to be a solo album, he said. It was always going to be a band album. But it was going to be done Eddie's way. No arguments, no input from a strong lead singer like Sammy or David Lee Roth. Gary didn't have that big personality, so Eddie took the lead. That control might have worked better if the band had been in a healthier place, but with Alex's divorce, Eddie's growing struggles, and the new dynamic with Gary, things just weren't clicking. Mike Post said there was a lot of chaos, not enough teamwork. It just didn't come together like it should have. Still, there were bright spots. Songs like Fire in the Hole ended up in movie soundtracks like Lethal Weapon 4, which gave them a bit of extra attention. And some fans, especially those who gave the album time, found things to love. Looking back, Van Halen III was more than just a difficult album. It was a turning point for the band. It marked the end of Michael Anthony's time in the group, a low point for Alex, and the beginning of the end of Eddie's creative control of the band. But even with all the drama, the legacy of Van Halen stayed strong. They were still one of the greatest rock bands of all time. Their earlier albums, like 1984, Fair Warning, and 5150, continued to inspire musicians everywhere. Fans kept listening, and new generations discovered their music year after year. In the end, Van Halen III might not be remembered as the band's best work, but it tells an important story. It's a reminder that even rock legends have tough times. Sometimes things fall apart behind the scenes, even when the show must go on. And for Michael Anthony, it was a moment of truth. He saw the highs and the lows. He gave fans a peek into what really happened during one of the most confusing, emotional, and strange times in Van Halen's long history.